In the previous episode, we explored the concept known in the Law of One as the harvest. Not a harvesting of human beings, not an evacuation of the chosen, and not a single apocalyptic event separating the worthy from everyone unfortunate enough to have missed the announcement. Rather, Ra describes harvest as a natural stage in the evolution of consciousness, the point at which a being completes the lessons of third density and becomes capable of entering the next. But humanity is not the only participant in this transition. The planet is changing too. According to Ra, Earth is moving from third density into fourth, a new environment of experience associated with love, understanding, and a far greater transparency between one consciousness and another. And in the Law of One, this planetary transition is described as neither accidental nor unexpected. In session 13, Don Elkins asks, how does a third density planet become a fourth density? Ra responds, the fourth density is, as we have said, as regularized in its approach as the striking of a clock upon the hour. The space time of your solar system has enabled this planetary sphere to spiral into space time of a different vibrational configuration. This causes the planetary sphere to be able to be molded by these new distortions. The language is remarkably calm. There is no celestial alarm, no cosmic emergency broadcast. The arrival of fourth density is compared to a clock striking the hour. It is regular, predictable, part of a much larger rhythm through which planets, and the consciousness inhabiting them, develop over time. But the arrival of the hour does not mean that everything upon the planet is prepared for it. As we explored in the previous episode, Earth's harvest is what Ra calls a mixed harvest. Humanity has not moved towards a single orientation. Some have increasingly chosen to serve others, some have chosen to serve self. Many have not made either choice with enough consistency to become harvestable. The planet is entering a new vibrational environment, while much of its population remains rooted in the patterns of the old one. And according to Ra, that creates friction. The transition into fourth density is therefore presented as natural, but not necessarily smooth. Across several sessions, Don asks whether this difficult transition could produce physical consequences. He refers to catastrophes, heating within the Earth, changing weather patterns, and what both he and Ra sometimes call Earth changes. Ra does not dismiss the possibility, but neither does Ra treat it with the urgency we might expect. That may be one of the strangest features of this part of the material. Events that we would describe with flashing maps, ominous music, and at least three experts standing in front of the same volcano are discussed by Ra almost as secondary complication. Something worth acknowledging, but not something upon which our spiritual attention should become fixed. This distinction will be central to everything that follows. In the Law of One, planetary disruption is not presented as the purpose of the harvest. It is not the mechanism that determines who graduates, and it is not described as a punishment imposed upon humanity for failing some divine examination. It is described more like a symptom, a physical expression of a planet attempting to settle into a new vibrational condition while the consciousness upon it remains deeply divided. Science can tell us that Earth changes. It can show us continents moving, oceans opening and closing, climates shifting, and entire landscapes being erased or rebuilt. It can reconstruct eruptions so powerful that their debris remains embedded in geological layers thousands of kilometers away. What science cannot currently tell us is whether any of these processes have a relationship to the evolution of consciousness, or to something called fourth density. But before examining Ra's explanation, it is worth remembering that planetary change itself is not speculative. It is the ordinary history of Earth. Mountains rise where oceans once existed, continents drift across the surface, magnetic poles wander, ice advances and withdraws, volcanoes darken skies while storms, earthquakes, floods, and droughts repeatedly reshape the conditions under which civilizations live. From the perspective of a human lifetime, the ground appears permanent. From the perspective of the planet, permanence may simply be an illusion produced by our very brief visit. So before we ask what the Law of One means by planetary disruption, we will begin with what we know. Not prophecy, not metaphysics, and not predictions about what may happen next. We will begin with the evidence written into the earth itself. To understand what Ra calls earth changes, we do not need to begin with prophecy. We can begin with geology. From the ground beneath our feet, earth often appears stable. Buildings remain where we place them, mountains look permanent, coastlines seem like fixed boundaries between land and sea. But this impression exists largely because human lives are short. Earth is not a static object. It is a continuously changing system, circulating heat through its interior, recycling portions of its crust, reorganizing oceans and continents, and exchanging energy between the land, atmosphere, ice, and the sea. The solid surface upon which we live is divided into tectonic plates. These enormous slabs of rock move relative to one another over the hotter and more mobile material beneath them. According to the United States Geological Survey, their average rates of movement range from less than 1 centimeter to more than 15 centimeters per year. At the lower end, that is barely noticeable. At the upper end, it is still unlikely to disrupt anyone's afternoon. But the planet is very patient. A few centimeters each year become hundreds of kilometers over geological time. New oceanic crust emerges along underwater ridges. Older crust is forced back into the mantle at subduction zones. Continents separate, collide, and sometimes assemble into temporary supercontinents, only to break apart again. The Atlantic Ocean did not always exist. India was once an isolated landmass moving northward across an ancient ocean. Its eventual collision with Eurasia raised the Himalayas, a process that continues today. Even the ocean floor is surprisingly temporary. While some continental rocks are more than 4 billion years old, nearly all present day oceanic crust is younger than approximately 200 million years. Older seafloor has largely been carried into the subduction zones and recycled into the earth. The floor is not merely shifting beneath us, parts of it are continually disappearing. Usually, this happens slowly enough to escape ordinary perception. Sometimes, however, centuries of gradual movement are released in minutes. On March 11th, 2011, a magnitude 9.1 earthquake struck beneath the ocean near the Japan Trench. In that region, the Pacific plate moves westward at approximately 8 centimeters per year and descends beneath the plate carrying northern Japan. 8 centimeters is not much, but the plates do not always move smoothly past one another. Sections of the boundary can remain locked while stress accumulates. When that locked region finally ruptures, the stored energy may be released with extraordinary force. The 2011 rupture displaced the seafloor and generated a tsunami that reached portions of the Japanese coast within approximately 30 minutes. More than 18,000 people were killed or remained missing. Entire communities were destroyed, and the flooding disabled the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power station, creating a technological disaster within a natural one. Nothing supernatural was required. No previously unknown force entered the planet. The earthquake was produced by the same tectonic system that had been moving quietly before anyone alive was even born. The catastrophe was not separate from the gradual process. It was one of its possible expressions. Volcanoes offer another example. Approximately 74,000 years ago, the Toba volcanic system on the island of Sumatra produced one of the largest known eruptions of the Quaternary period. The dimensions that remain are difficult to absorb. Today, Lake Toba occupies part of a caldera approximately 100 kilometers long and 35 kilometers wide. Samusur Island, which raises from the lake, is part of a massive block of material that was uplifted following the eruption. A landscape now known for still water, green mountains, and quiet villages was formed by an event of unimaginable violence. The Earth does occasionally display a rather dark sense of interior design. Material from the Toba eruption spread across an enormous area. Microscopic volcanic glass associated with the eruption has been identified thousands of kilometers away, including at archaeological sites in southern Africa. Toba has often been connected to a dramatic theory about human history that the eruption produced a prolonged volcanic winter and reduced the human population to a very small number of survivors. That idea became popular partly because it offered a possible explanation for signs of a genetic bottleneck in our species, but it is not yet settled science. Researchers continue to debate the severity, duration, and geographical reach of Toba's climactic effects. Archaeological evidence from Africa and India suggests that at least some human populations continue living through the period without the complete cultural interruption we might expect from a near extinction event. The eruption was real, but the claim that it almost eliminated humanity remains uncertain. That distinction matters. Natural history is already extraordinary without improving it for dramatic effect. A more recent Indonesian eruption gives us a clearer example of geological change affecting weather far beyond the place where it began. In April of 1815, Mount Tambora erupted on the island of Sumbawa. Ash and sulfur bearing gases entered the atmosphere. Some of the sulfur dioxide was converted into tiny sulfate particles capable of reflecting incoming sunlight, temporarily reducing the amount of solar energy reaching the surface. The following year, 1816, became known across parts of Europe and North America as the year without a summer. The northern hemisphere experienced an average temperature reduction of roughly 1 degree Fahrenheit. That number may sound modest, but averages can conceal severe regional consequences. Unseasonable cold, heavy rain, frost, and disrupted growing seasons contributed to crop failures and food shortages far from Indonesia. A geological event in Southeast Asia altered weather experienced on the opposite side of the planet. Earth's systems may be described separately for convenience: geology, atmosphere, ocean, climate, but the divisions are largely ours. The systems themselves remain connected, and climate does not always change gradually. Roughly 14,500 years ago, Earth was emerging from the last glacial period. Temperatures were rising, ice sheets were retreating, and the planet appeared to be moving toward the warmer conditions of the present interglacial age. Then the northern hemisphere abruptly returned to near glacial conditions. This interval is known as the Younger Dryas. Its precise causes and mechanisms remain subjects of research and are highly debated. What is clear is the speed with which climate can sometimes reorganize. At the end of the Younger Dryas, approximately 11,500 years ago, evidence from Greenland ice cores indicates that local temperatures rose by around 10 degrees Celsius within roughly a decade, not across a geological age, within a period comparable to the time between childhood and adulthood. This does not mean that every part of Earth warmed by 10 degrees, but the Younger Dryas demonstrates that parts of the climate system can cross thresholds and reorganize much more quickly than the phrase geological change might suggest. Taken together, these examples reveal an Earth that changes at many speeds. Continents can drift almost imperceptibly for millions of years. Tectonic stress can accumulate for centuries and release within minutes. A volcanic eruption can disturb weather around the world within months. And elements of the climate system can shift dramatically within the span of a human life. None of this proves Ra's claim that planetary disruption is connected to a transition between densities. Plate tectonics offers no evidence of fourth density. Volcanic eruptions do not contain a measurable record of harvest. And climate science does not require a spiritual vibration to explain the mechanism it observes. But science does establish something important before we return to the law of one. Planetary change is not an anomaly. It is not evidence that Earth has malfunctioned. It is a part of the ordinary behavior of a dynamic world. The planet we experience as solid and permanent has never truly been either. The question raised by the law of one is therefore not whether Earth can undergo periods of dramatic change. We already know that it can. The question is whether the physical changes described by science might coexist with another process, one involving not only the movement of matter, but the changing conditions of consciousness itself. And to understand Ra's answer, we must begin with a distinction that removes much of the sensationalism from the subject. Ra does not describe the catastrophes associated with harvest as its purpose. Ra describes them as its symptom. After examining Earth's natural history, we can return to the specific claim made in the Law of One. Ra does not merely say that planetary catastrophes may occur near the end of a cycle. Ra attempts to explain what those catastrophes represent, and just as importantly, what they do not represent. In session 33, Don Elkins asks whether the difficult conditions surrounding the transition into fourth density might increase polarization. Perhaps, he suggests, greater disruption creates more catalyst, allowing more people to choose either the positive or negative path before harvest is complete. Ra answers. Firstly, the planetary catastrophes, as you may call them, are a symptom of the difficult harvest rather than a consciously programmed catalyst for harvest. Thus, we do not concern ourselves with it, for it is random in respect to conscious catalyst, such as we may make available. The second portion is this: the results of the random catalyst of what you call the Earth changes are also random. Thus, we may see probability possibility vortices going towards positive and negative. However, it will be as it will be. The first distinction is the most important. The catastrophes are a symptom of the difficult harvest. They are not its objective. According to Ra, Earth changes are not events deliberately scheduled to frighten humanity into spiritual growth. They are not a final examination administered by the planet, and they are not a cleansing imposed upon those judged unworthy of entering fourth density. The planet is not punishing humanity, nor is the Creator arranging disasters to improve the graduation statistics. In Ra's description, the difficulty arises because Earth is entering a fourth density vibrational environment, while the collective consciousness inhabiting it remains disharmonious. The catastrophe is an expression of that difficulty, not a sentence passed upon the people who experience it. This becomes even clearer in Ra's use of the phrase consciously programmed catalyst. Elsewhere in the material, Ra explains that some catalysts may be selected before incarnation. An entity can choose certain lessons, relationships, limitations, or recurring circumstances that offer opportunities for growth. This does not mean that every moment of life is predetermined. It means that, within Ra's model, an incarnation may contain certain guidelines, patterns through which particular lessons are likely to appear. But in session 33, Ra separates planetary catastrophe from that kind of conscious programming. Earth changes are described as random in respect to conscious catalyst. That is an unusually important caution. It means we should not look at people affected by an earthquake, flood, eruption, or storm and assume that the event was individually assigned to them. We cannot say that they needed the experience. We cannot say that they attracted it. And we cannot claim that their suffering reveals their spiritual condition. Those interpretations may sound metaphysical, but they are not supported by the passage. Ra's answer removes the moral accusation from catastrophe. A person caught within a planetary event is not necessarily being rewarded, punished, tested, or corrected. Sometimes an entity lives upon a changing world, and the world changes. But random catalysts can still be used. An earthquake may not have been consciously programmed for spiritual development, yet the responses to it can still reveal and intensify an entity's orientation. One person may risk their own safety to help a stranger. Another may exploit confusion for personal advantage. Some may experience generosity, courage, cooperation, or a sudden reordering of what matters to them. Others may experience fear, isolation, anger, or a desire for control. And many may simply struggle to survive without transforming the experience into a clear spiritual lesson at all. Ra therefore says that the results of Earth changes are also random. The event does not automatically produce positive polarization, it does not automatically produce negative polarization, and it certainly does not make everyone involved instantly harvestable, which would be an unusually aggressive form of spiritual education. Instead, Ross says that the resulting possibilities may move in either direction. The physical event creates circumstances. Consciousness determines what, if anything, is made of them. This helps explain one of the calmest and perhaps most surprising sentences in the entire answer. Thus, we do not concern ourselves with it. Read without text, that sentence might sound indifferent. Ra has just acknowledged planetary catastrophes and then appears to move past them with the conversational urgency of someone noticing a slightly crooked picture frame. But the remainder of the answer clarifies the point. Ra is not saying that suffering is irrelevant. Ra is saying that catastrophe is not the central mechanism of harvest. The Confederation's concern is the evolution and orientation of consciousness. From that perspective, an earthquake cannot make the choice for us. A volcanic eruption cannot polarize a person. A flood cannot determine whether someone is oriented toward service to others or service to self. Physical upheaval can alter a setting. It cannot decide what the consciousness within that setting becomes. There's also an important boundary around prophecy that is placed within this idea of randomness. If Earth changes are random in the results, and if Ra describes them through probabilities rather than fixed outcomes, then the law of one cannot reasonably be used as a disaster calendar. Ra provides no reliable dates, no list of doomed cities, no safe regions, no instructions to purpose remote property, reinforce a bunker, or become unusually invested in canned beans. Its attention remains elsewhere. The material consistently returns us to consciousness, not because physical suffering is unreal, but because physical survival and spiritual harvest are not the same thing. A person may survive every catastrophe and remain unchanged. Another may live an outwardly uneventful life and quietly make the choice that carries consciousness into another density. In Ra's model, the drama of the event does not determine the depth of the lesson. And that may be why planetary catastrophe is treated with such unexpected calm. It is significant, it may be painful, it may change landscapes and civilizations, but it is not the author of our spiritual orientation. The earth may provide the circumstances, the choice remains our own. If planetary catastrophes are a symptom of a difficult harvest, the next question is obvious. A symptom of what? Ra's answer leads into one of the more unusual ideas in the Law of One, the suggestion that humanity's collective state of consciousness can affect the physical condition of the planet it inhabits. Earth is not regarded as an inert sphere upon which consciousness happens to reside. Earth is an entity. It possesses its own energy system, its own evolutionary process, and its own movement through the densities of experience. Humanity exists within that planetary system, in something resembling the way individual cells exist within a body. We remain distinct, but we are not entirely separate. In session 60, Don Elkins asks why the transition into fourth density would generate what he calls unusable heat within the Earth. Ra begins with an analogy. When an individual is unable to live harmoniously with their circumstances, emotional pressure can accumulate. Anger may be described as heat, grief may appear as tears. If distress continues for a long period, it may eventually affect the condition of the physical body. Ra then expands this analogy from one body to an entire planet. When an entire planetary system of peoples and cultures repeatedly experiences disharmony on a great scale, The earth under the feet of these entities shall begin to resonate with this disharmony. The image is straightforward. An individual consciousness exists within a body. The collective consciousness exists within a planetary body. And just as long term imbalance within an individual may eventually appear through the physical vehicle, Ra proposes that prolonged disharmony within a civilization may appear through the physical vehicle of the planet. I want to mention the beginning of this quote to show how some illnesses may possibly be created within the body. If an entity is not in harmony with its circumstances, it feels a burning within. The temperature of the physical vehicle does not yet rise, only the heat of the temper or the tears, as we may describe this disharmony. However, if an entity persists for a long period of your space time in feeling this emotive heat and disharmony, the entire body complex will begin to resonate to this disharmony, and the disharmony will then show up as the cancer or other degenerative distortion from what you call health. So, to be clear, this does not mean that Earth becomes angry. The planet is not offended by our behavior. It does not produce an earthquake because humanity has failed to be sufficiently polite. The process Ra describes is not one of judgment, it is one of resonance. Humanity generates a collective pattern through billions of thoughts, intentions, relationships, institutions, and choices. That pattern becomes part of the environment in which the planet itself is attempting to move into fourth density. If the incoming vibration is associated with love, understanding, and a growing awareness of unity, then a civilization still organized largely around separation may experience increasing incompatibility with that environment. Fear conflicts with openness. Control conflicts with mutual recognition. The desire to dominate conflicts with a fourth density movement towards shared consciousness. The result, according to Ra, is friction. Not because fourth density is attacking third density, but because the two patterns cannot be smoothly reconciled. It is somewhat like trying to run two incompatible operating systems on the same planet, except the error message may be geological. This idea returns in session 65, when Dawn asks whether planets experiencing a mixed harvest commonly encounter additional catalysts near the end of their cycles. Ra answers, in the event of mixed harvest, there is nearly always disharmony, and therefore, added catalysts in the form of your so called earth changes. The wording is important. Ra does not say that earth changes occur at every harvest. The emphasis is upon a mixed harvest. A civilization moving together toward a shared orientation would presumably create less resistance during its transition. But when a planetary population remains divided between incompatible paths, and when much of that population has not clearly chosen either path, the movement into fourth density becomes more difficult. Earth is ready to enter a new condition. Its inhabitants are not moving together. In the next exchange, Don tries to clarify the relationship. He proposes that the added catalyst is produced by the orientation of the consciousness inhabiting the planet. He compares collective humanity to a single entity made from billions of individual mind body spirit complexes. Ra tells him that this viewpoint is correct. This is the deeper meaning of planetary disharmony within the material. It is not simply that human beings disagree. Disagreement can be healthy. Different perspectives can produce understanding, creativity, and growth. A harmonious planet would not necessarily be one in which everyone holds the same opinions, wears matching clothing, and reaches enthusiastic consensus about where to eat. Disharmony, in this context, is a more fundamental condition. It is the repeated inability to recognize other beings as part of the same living whole. It appears through violence, exploitation, domination, indifference, and systems that preserve separation even when cooperation is possible. And because these patterns are collective, no single person can be blamed for the condition of the entire planet. Humanity's vibration is the cumulative expression of billions of beings, each carrying different histories, levels of awareness, fears, hopes, and degrees of choice. The planet is not responding to one person's anger, nor would an afternoon of unusually peaceful thinking be expected to deactivate a volcano. Ra's model operates at the level of collective patterns sustained across great periods of time. This is also where the idea can easily be pushed beyond what the material says. Ra does not give us a method for connecting a particular earthquake to a particular war. Ra does not say that a hurricane can be traced to a specific region's moral failures. Ra does not provide a formula through which the emotional state of humanity can be converted into degrees of planetary temperature. Any such claim would be our invention. The material presents a general metaphysical relationship between collective disharmony and planetary disturbance. It does not give us a reliable way to diagnose individual events. Later in session 65, Ra offers an image that captures the transition more clearly than any technical explanation. Earth is compared to an entity in the process of being born. The planet is ready. The delivery is not proceeding smoothly. This is a very different image from destruction. Birth can be disruptive, it can be painful, it can involve pressure, uncertainty, and the breakdown of a condition that can no longer continue. But the purpose of birth is not the destruction of what is being born. It is the emergence of something that could not fully exist within the previous environment. From this perspective, the planetary disruptions associated with harvest are not the death of Earth. They are part of Earth's difficult entrance into another stage of experience. The old conditions cannot remain indefinitely. The new conditions cannot arrive without adjustment. And humanity, within Ra's model, is not merely witnessing the process from the surface, we are participating in it. Yet, participation should not be confused with guilt. A civilization may contribute collectively to planetary disharmony without every person causing each event that follows. And sometimes, according to Ra's own account, people can be caught within enormous planetary change through no action of their own. For an example of that distinction, the material directs us far into Earth's past, to a peaceful civilization Ra calls Mu. Ra provides one story that illustrates the distinction between planetary catastrophe and spiritual punishment particularly well. It concerns the civilization known in the material as Mu, and we have a full episode concerning Mu and Atlantis that you can check out. Don Elkins originally asks about Atlantis and Lemuria, apparently treating them as parts of the same ancient civilization. Ra corrects him, saying that Atlantis and Lemuria were separate, and then refers to the latter civilization as Mu. According to Ra, the people of Mu arrived early within Earth's present third density cycle, approximately 53,000 years ago. They are described as relatively primitive in their material development, but spiritually advanced. They did not possess the technological sophistication later attributed to Atlantis. They did not manipulate intelligent energy. They did not develop weapons capable of destroying their civilization. And Ra does not describe them as negatively oriented. Instead, Ra calls Mu a helpful and harmless place which was washed beneath the ocean during a readjustment of your sphere's tectonic plates through no action of their own. That final phrase is crucial. Through no action of their own. The people of Mu were not destroyed because their civilization had become corrupt. They were not punished for misusing spiritual knowledge. Their catastrophe was not described as a consequence of warfare, technology, or a collective choice toward service to self. The planet underwent a tectonic readjustment. They just happened to live where it occurred. Ra later places the catastrophe at approximately 50,000 years ago, meaning that the civilization existed for roughly 3,000 years before the destruction was completed. In session 21, Dawn asks whether the end of the first major cycle caused Mu's destruction, or whether the event merely happened at around the same time. Ra answers, there is a confluence of energies at the ending of a major cycle. This encouraged what was already an inevitable adjustment in the movement of the surfaces of your planetary sphere. This is one of the closest parallels in the material to the planetary disruption surrounding the present transition. The ending cycle did not arbitrarily create a catastrophe that would otherwise never have occurred. Ross says the tectonic adjustment was already inevitable. The confluence of energies associated with the end of the cycle encouraged that adjustment. The cycle and the physical event were therefore related, but the people of Mu were not morally responsible for either. This distinction separates Mu sharply from Atlantis. In Ra's account, Atlantis was eventually destroyed after its people used advanced knowledge destructively and engaged in devastating warfare. Mu is different. Its people did not destroy their land changed beneath them. Of course, the existence of Mu as Ra describes is not established by archaeology or geology. Modern science has not confirmed an advanced spiritual civilization submerged by tectonic movement approximately 50,000 years ago. This remains part of the history presented in the Law of One. But within the philosophy of the material, the purpose of the story is clear. Natural catastrophe does not indicate spiritual failure. An advanced and peaceful people may still experience physical destruction. Being kind does not make a civilization tectonically invincible. And being caught within an earth change does not reveal how positively or negatively someone has lived. Ross says that some of Mu's inhabitants survived and migrated into what we now call Russia, North America, and South America, carrying elements of their civilization with them. The land disappeared, the people did not entirely disappear with it, and their spiritual development was not erased by the destruction of their physical environment. Mu therefore returns us to the central point of this episode. A planetary catastrophe may transform the conditions of life without determining the condition of consciousness. It may destroy cities, it may scatter populations, it may bring one chapter of human history to an abrupt end, but it does not decide the harvest. The material contains no promise that spiritually oriented people will be protected from every physical danger. What it offers instead is the suggestion that physical catastrophe, even on the scale of a civilization, is not the end of the being who experiences it. The planet may change, the incarnation may end, but consciousness continues its journey. And with that distinction in place, the final question is not how to escape every possible Earth change. It is how we choose to live while the Earth is changing. What, then, are we supposed to do with this information? If the law of one is correct, that Earth is undergoing a difficult transition into fourth density, and if planetary disruptions may accompany that transition, how should an individual respond? The most tempting response is prediction. We want dates, maps, timelines. We want to know which coastline will change, which volcano will awaken, and which location will remain safely untouched, while everyone else discovers that the real estate agent neglected to mention the density transition. Uncertainty creates a powerful desire for control, but Ra repeatedly refuses to provide that control. When Dawn asks about the Earth change prophecies of Edgar Cayce, Ra describes the future through what the material calls probability possibility vortices. A prophecy may perceive a strong possibility, but a strong possibility is not a fixed event. Ra compares these possible futures to products available within a grocery store. Some possibilities are present in great quantities, others occupy only a few boxes upon the shelf. Which one humanity eventually selects remains uncertain. It is an unexpectedly domestic analogy for a planetary catastrophe. Apparently, even from outside our ordinary perception of time, the future still resembles an indecisive trip through the breakfast aisle. But beneath the humor is an important warning. The value of prophecy must be realized to be only that of expressing possibilities. Prophecy is not certainty. And here's the rest of that quote. Moreover, it must be, in our humble opinion, carefully taken into consideration that any time space viewing, whether by one of your time space or by one such as we who view the time space from a dimension, shall we say, exterior to it, will have a quite difficult time expressing time measurement values. Thus, prophecy given in such specific terms is more interesting for the content or type of possibility predicted than for the space time nexus of its supposed occurrence. Even when Ra acknowledges a strong possibility of Earth changes, the material avoids presenting one inevitable geographical future. This matters because session 65 was recorded in 1981. During the discussion, Don framed some of the possible developments as events that might unfold over the following 20 years. That period has passed. Earth has experienced serious earthquakes, eruptions, storms, and wars, but not one clear, globally synchronized geological transformation matching the most dramatic interpretations placed upon the material. The responsible response is not to quietly move every prediction into the next decade. It is to take Ra's original caution seriously. Possibilities change. Human choices affect which possibilities become experience. And predictions involving dates are especially vulnerable to distortion. The material, therefore, does not provide a basis for announcing that a particular catastrophe is imminent. It cannot tell us that every earthquake is evident of harvest. It cannot establish that a storm occurred because fourth density arrived in that region. And it cannot tell us that one location is spiritually safer than another. None of this means that practical preparation is foolish. People living near coastlines, faults, volcanoes, floodplains, or severe weather corridors should understand the genuine risks of that environment. Emergency supplies, evacuation plans, reliable information, and functioning public institutions save lives. Metaphysical calm does not require geological carelessness. But there is a difference between preparation and fixation. Preparation responds to a known physical risk. Fixation attempts to eliminate uncertainty by transforming every event into confirmation of a prophecy. One helps us meet reality, the other may prevent us from seeing it clearly. Ra continually redirects attention away from predicting Earth changes and toward the choices made within changing conditions. A disaster may not be consciously programmed catalyst, but once it occurs, it becomes part of the experience available to everyone affected by it. There will be people who need shelter, people who need food, people who need medical care, people searching for family members, people who need accurate information rather than rumors, and people who simply need another human being to remain calm beside them. These are not secondary spiritual opportunities, they are the work. In ordinary life, service to others may seem abstract. During disruption, it becomes very practical. Love may take the form of carrying water. Compassion may become transportation. Wisdom may mean refusing to circulate an alarming claim that has not yet been verified. Sometimes the most spiritually useful person in the room is simply the one who remembered the flashlight. This also clarifies what the harvest does not measure. It does not measure who successfully predicts a catastrophe. It does not measure who finds the safest geographical location. It does not measure who possesses the longest supply of food, or the most elaborate theory explaining why everyone else failed to prepare. and it does not measure physical survival. As we explored in the previous episode, harvest concerns the orientation and readiness of consciousness. A person does not become fourth density compatible by escaping an earthquake, nor does someone lose that readiness because their physical incarnation ends within one. Ra's account of Mu makes this especially clear. A peaceful civilization experienced destruction through no action of its own. Its people were not spiritually condemned by the loss of their land. The physical event and the spiritual condition were not the same. This is perhaps the deepest reason for Ra's calm demeanor around planetary catastrophes. From the perspective of third density, physical death appears final. The destruction of a city can look like the destruction of every future its inhabitants might have lived. Within the philosophy of the Law of One, however, consciousness is not produced by the physical body and does not end with it. An incarnation can be interrupted, a civilization can disappear, a continent can change, but the being continues. That idea does not make grief unnecessary, and it does not make physical suffering unimportant, and it should never be used to minimize the lives of those affected by catastrophe. It simply places the event within a larger view of existence. Ra's calm is not the calm of indifference, it is the calm of continuity. There is another reason not to surrender to fear. If collective disharmony contributes to the difficulty of Earth's transition, then collective harmony must also matter. That does not mean we can meditate a tectonic plate into remaining still. It means that every consciousness contributes something to the planetary field described by Ra. Fear contributes one pattern, control contributes another, compassion contributes another. The individual may not be able to change the direction of civilization alone, but the collective condition of Earth is made from individual orientations. Near the end of session 65, while discussing the many possibilities involving distress, war, and planetary difficulty, Ra asks whether Earth could suddenly polarize toward harmony through one powerful moment of inspiration. This is shown here. We may note at this point, while you ponder the possibility probability vortices, that although you have many items which cause distress and thus offer seeking and service opportunities, there is always one container in that store of peace, love, light, and joy. This vortex may be very small, but to turn one's back upon it is to forget the infinite possibilities of the present moment. Could your planet polarize towards harmony in one fine, strong moment of inspiration? Yes, my friends. It is not probable, but it is ever possible. This is not blind optimism. Ra does not say that everything will become peaceful because we wish it to be. The material openly acknowledges confusion, conflict, difficulty, and the possibility of planetary disruption, but it refuses to treat any negative future as absolute. As long as choice remains, possibility remains. And perhaps that is the most useful way to understand this entire subject. The Law of One does not ask us to watch the horizon in fear. It does not ask us to interpret every disaster as punishment. It does not ask us to become certain about events that even Ra describes as only probabilities. It asks us to recognize that Earth is changing, and then return our attention to the quality of consciousness we bring into that change. The ground beneath us has never been completely still. The future has never been completely guaranteed. And physical life has never offered permanent security. The transition into fourth density may make those truths more visible, but it does not create them. What remains within our reach is the choice Ra has emphasized from the beginning: how we see one another, how we respond to suffering, what we do with fear, and whether uncertainty closes the heart or gives it another reason to open. A changing world does not relieve us of the ordinary work of becoming. If anything, it makes that work easier to see. The ground may shift, civilizations may change, and one density may quietly give way to another. But the choice remains exactly where it has always been, in the way we meet one another while the world is changing. Thank you for watching or listening. I wish you all love, light, peace, and joy. Take care.